Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, part of the 2026 Design Timber series from Timber Development UK. In a minute, we're going to be hearing from the team behind the fantastic New Wave house, a beautiful and sustainable rooftop extension. But just before we start, and while everybody's joining, I'm going to say a few words introducing Timber Development UK. We were formed in 2021 from the merger of the TTF and Trada. That created the biggest, most comprehensive supply chain body in the UK for timber. Essentially, if you work with timber, you belong with us. Here are our three mission statements: to connect the supply chain, lead best practice, and to accelerate a low carbon future, because timber is one of the most versatile and sustainable building materials that you can use right now. We do this in a number of ways by putting on webinars such as this one, but also via a number of other avenues which all our members have access to. You can see there, Designing Timber, that's our flagship print magazine that goes out to all our members. We also have a sister publication called Supplying Timber, which, as the name suggests, focus more on the supply side rather than the design side. You can see also a couple of our publications from our comprehensive knowledge library. There is a great document that's free to download called Moisture Management During Construction, vital, essential guidance for anyone working with timber. You can see that green document there using SIPs is one example of the many documents you can find in our knowledge library, one of our many timber knowledge sheets. They cover anything and everything to do with timber, whether it's design, construction, building, pre-design, aftercare, all the many timber components and details that you could be interested in. And you can also see one of our case studies there. That's a fantastic, ingenious, demountable building called the Hive. One of many case studies you'll find in our knowledge library. Many of our resources are free for all to access, but there are also many documents that you have to be a member to access. Joining TDUK helps us promote sustainable construction. It helps us aid our members. It helps us put on webinars such as this one. So we do encourage you to join us if you've enjoyed the webinar today. There's many resources that you gain access to, a lot of guidance and direct advice you can get from us if you're a member. There's plenty of information on how to join on our website. So in a moment, we're going to hand over to Barry, Edward and Elisabeth to hear more about New Wave House. Do use the Q&A button. You can find that at the bottom of the screen. Just type in a question as it occurs to you, and there'll be a bit of time at the end for us to have some questions and answers, but also we might try and answer them as we go. So do make use of that Q&A box. In a moment, I'm about to hand over to Barry. So thank you for your time. I'm sure it's going to be a great webinar. So over to you, Barry, if you'd like to start sharing your screen.
I'll just share my screen. Can you see that?
It's good to me, yes.
Yeah, just to full screen.
Make it large.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and hi, everybody. I'm here today obviously to present our project New Wave House. Just one of the sort of key images. This is the office. It's actually the office for New Wave London. So just to start out, this project it was a collaboration between ourselves, Thomas-McBrien Architects, and New Wave London. New Wave London are a contractor, a builder. They work in the sort of prime residential. They build some of the best, or have built some of the best residential properties I'd say, in London, definitely in the last 10 to 15 years. This project, as I said, was a collaboration. It's New Wave House. It is the headquarters or HQ for New Wave London. We had the unique scenario whereby we have the client is actually also the contractor. So it's quite a unique kind of situation. This, though, is not just a one-off. It wasn't just a one-off collaboration. This is a sort of part of an evolution of our working relationship as part of Thomas-McBrien with New Wave London. myself, and Jean-Marc Wirtelek, who is the managing director for New Wave London. So I'm just going to give you a quick sort of insight into that kind of relationship. So in 2014, I worked for Cousins & Cousins Architects. I was the project architect on the new build private residence for Jean-Marc in Highgate in North London. This is just a series of shots. It's a large three-story house over basement, approximately 7,000 square feet in size, so significant property. New build property, I'll go into quickly, but you've got these sort of three-story board-marked spine walls, one or two the house, bridges that connect to a series of accommodation, kitchen, living, dining, bedrooms on the upper floors, and then leads you down into the basement below. But you can see just through the sort of this series of images, the kind of that level of detail. One thing about the design, but that level of detail, execution, and the precision that was sort of achieved in this property. And then finishing up, even that was sort of brought through into the joinery. And everything to say here, it was obviously built by New Wave London as part of that. So I left Cousins Kozak back, must be what, 2016, set up my own business, Thomas-McBrien Architects in 2017. One of the very first projects was a commission by Jean-Marc, was a development project in North London, actually not far away from New Wave House. It was the refurbishment and extension of an existing 1930s property on a sloping site. This is an image of the kind of the new extension. Again, sort of two brick walls with this sort of large kind of sliding portal window out onto the sloping garden. Again, this sort of kitchen, living, open space. This is a shot looking back in towards the kitchen space, and the steps up, you can sort of understand how the connection to the existing property. Again, that's sort of probably an indication again about how that level of execution is key. Again, everything was made by New Wave. We even designed this sort of pendant feature over the kitchen island. So it goes beyond just building. We were down into the the one-to-one detail and the craft. And then finishing up with this this shot. This is the kind of connection to large sliding screen. I think it's 2.8 by 6 meters. But interesting story about this. We couldn't find anything off the shelf, and I suppose it gives you an indication of how our relationship works. Essentially, it's okay. How can we find things, bring them together, and design something, manufacture something together that works? We were able to find a sliding door system from an Italian ironmongery company, brought that to London, bring it to the workshop, and figure out how this sliding system could work. And yeah, we've ended up with this result. It's an element that we get contacted a lot. Probably could set up a business off the back of it, but one of those things that just give you that sort of insight into our sort of how we work together. At the same time, we were appointed, Thomas-McBrien Architects were appointed by New Wave London to design the fit out of their office, which is located at New Wave House on the first floor level. Again, a series of images, timber paneling mixed with sort of textured plaster. This is a shot of the meeting room. You can actually see the kind of nod to that light fixture that we designed and made together on the previous project. But again, you can sort of see that kind of level of execution that's gone into this project. And then in 2001, we were working with Aesop. We were working in collaboration with Aesop on the design of their flagship store on Regent Street. New Wave London had just completed Aesop's Norcote Road project down in South London in Clapham. And as full circle moment, we ended up working together with the delivery of Aesop's flagship store, as I said, on Regent Street. Large chamber, this sort of nod to the Regency architecture of Regent Street. This large kind of Portland stone bespoke sink that's located centrally in the space is kind of part of the ritual of Aesop's kind of expression or of product. We have flanking joinery, retail display, and then this sort of pitted plaster chamber, these sort of big rooms you get at this sort of in that sort of representative of kind of that Regency moves. At the back, we've this sort of more intimate space, kind of private sensorium, kind of what they call is the expiration for the kind of fragrance product. And then to the right-hand side, this was vertical, not back of house, vertical circulation to what there's a large treatment. It's probably 280 square meters in the basement in the Undercroft, right below Regent Street, series of treatment rooms at that level of mood and was kind of brought through intimate spaces. It goes much further than that. As I said, you can sort of see that with previous projects. The level of quality we're talking about, kind of representative in this image. Again, everything seen here was made in the workshop back in New Wave House, down to even the kind of, the craftsmanship. This was this kind of maple joinery that folded out, the fragrance armoire, you could put your garment in to infuse it. But it was, that level of kind of build right down into furniture, and that level of craftsmanship is key. So I hope that gives you an understanding of kind of how our relationship, there's a sort of a 10-year, probably touching actually 12 years now of a relationship of working together. So New Wave House, our working relationship in that is part of that evolution of project-based work. So let's go to New Wave House. This is the image that Matt presented previously, the idea of this glulam lightweight timber roof extension on top of the existing building. But before we could obviously get to this position or where we've ended up, this was a photograph I've been able to find last night. It was our first visit to New Wave House back in November 2019. We literally had just finished the fit out of New Wave London's office at first floor level, which is located in one of the wings. And at that time, New Wave London themselves were growing rapidly, working on a number of projects. Jean-Marc was considering even leaving this building at the time to work elsewhere. The joinery workshop is located on ground floor. It wasn't really big enough. The office, which we just fitted out, was already nearly at capacity. And it wasn't really working. So we were appointed to undertake a feasibility kind of the existing building to see was there any potential of adaptation to some of the floor arrangement or some of the layout, just to see could it work for kind of expansion of the business. To do that, of course, you kind of have to understand the building itself. If I was to take a step back, this is actually, would you believe, New Wave House back in 2010. This was, at the time, was known as Emerald House. This is when it was purchased by New Wave London. Sort of 1950s, 1960s concrete frame building, brick infill. You can sort of see the remnants of house, sort of skip between the two. The workshop space existed, that sort of story and a half space. This 2-story block at the front of the building sort of remained, adapted, of course, but remained in place. So we needed to understand the existing building before we could consider a sort of expansion. So where we were in 2019, let's take it right back, 2010. Looking through old records, old documents, old drawings, submissions, we started to get a real understanding of the building itself, as you can see just quickly in this plan. That's the remnants of the workshop space that was in that image you've seen. And as I said, that 2-story portion of the building in front accommodated meeting rooms and office with sort of ancillary space kind of along the perimeter around the back. There were subsequent extensions added to the building, I think 4 in total between 2010 and 2019. Maybe this is a drawing taken from one of the plan applications. There was a side extension added to the building, single-story side extension, which you can see is a nod to it here on the elevation. The workshop itself was extended to line the parapet. That was to give you, utilize the full story and a half that existed, but have further space up above. But you can sort of see that through that analysis, it was important to understand how the building, whatever, in its own right and extended 4 or 5 times, how that works structurally as well as layout. Taking that sort of deep dive into then the kind of the sort of structural intent or the structural elements that were undertaken at the time. There was introduction of large concrete slabs to kind of pick up on the new structural extension. You can sort of see the foundation line of that single-story extension. And then again, this was sort of for the documentation, just giving us a really good understanding of how the whole building has come together. And through a series of sort of images that we've been able to pull out in that kind of research, you can see, I think this is a very nice shot. You can see that was this sort of grey steel here is the existing steel of the previous workshop. This was the extension added. You can see the holes that were in this new steel. That beam was then moved up to create that kind of two-story aspect. But this series of shots gives you good understanding, or give us a good understanding of how, yeah, the building had been constructed in its own right. We did undertake trial holes along the perimeter, again, to understand the sort of foundations of the existing building as well as these additions. But with that knowledge, this sort of record and that sort of on-site knowledge, we could grasp for what was going on structurally. And then off the back of that, we built this sort of really detailed 3D model of the existing building. That became the basis for everything, as well as capturing the kind of envelope inside this model was the whole structural arrangement of the building itself. So going back to where we were in 2019, okay, now we have an understanding the building, was taking that and really starting to look at the feasibility study. That couple of months we done on that research really kind of really informed us and the structural engineer how we could sort of move forward. So leading to the proposal, this was an image weirdly I found. This was, I think, probably 2 weeks after our sort of reset intent. Randomly, again, came across it last night as I was preparing this slideshow. And it's funny how it's not far off where we've literally ended up on the project, and how I think most people on here, architects and engineers or anybody in that design world, how that sort of, your first idea can sometimes be your strongest, or maybe you go back to, and it's just a nice kind of moment on that. But we're obviously dealing with a contractor, builder, someone who builds things. It's working three-dimensionally is very much fundamental part of our business. We love building models. Models are fundamental design tool for us, but present a model to a client, I mean, it always goes down well, but present it to a builder to understand how this comes together. Just sold the idea. This was a grey card model, scale 1 to 100, built of boltwoods, just to give you, I suppose, the idea how we seen this coming together conceptually, but also some way structurally as well, of how it worked. And I think, through that, you work with someone or with the guys who are building every day, this is just a real selling point. They just get it from the outset. But of course, one thing conceptually is another thing, how do you build it? And I can go back to our detailed 3D model of the existing structure. As I said, we was kind of understanding how the building had been formed and what the structural strategy was. This is an overview of the existing building as it is. You can sort of see at roof level, there was parapet. So the parapet in this location it sort of was that was the parapet or the low bearing wall that represents the workshop space at ground floor level. This is the sort of parapet or the defining line for that two-story existing extension at the front of the building. And then those side extensions, this sort of side extension, which had been sort of developed 3 times over the course of those few years to align everything at one level. But at least through this, we understood, okay, there's a sort of a perimeter as a parapet that we could lean on as a structural aspect. First move was to cast a ring beam on top of the parapet that sort of tied the whole building together and give us, I suppose, a foundation in the air essentially for this glulam structure. We then took a nod from what happened previously, extended the beams again up through the workshop space. So top of column became top of beam, or top of parapet, or top of ring beam, and then connected that into the ring beam just to pull the building together. And then from there we had a timber deck upon which we could work to timber that out, connect it all back to the ring beam with openings in that floor plate for access and escape. This gives us the perfect deck. We could work from them. It was installing in the glulam ring beam, the glulam columns, the glulam, I suppose, lintel and header beam. And then we inserted these two sort of spine walls. The longer wall sort of rested on that sort of central column structure of the workshop below. The shorter wall was constructed on the existing load bearing wall that provided that sort of existing two-story extension with the workshop. And then we could tie all that together. That prevented the racking. So these sort of two spine walls, this sort of T became that sort of connecting piece, and could tie that back to the structure. This was, yeah, that's where we ended up. And you can see how we went from that model, that idea of the timber on top of this white plinth box. So essentially what we ended up was 500 square meters of internal floor area on top of the building. With 100 square meters of external terrace, that terrace could be accessed by anybody within the building. Became this sort of communal terrace, became this sort of lungs a little bit for the building itself. Sort of early on, I suppose just when we start construction, we commissioned this model, 1:20 model of the timber pavilion itself, the glulam structure, how that would come together. That was on site from day one. That every site meeting, we always refer to the model. Actually, if you can see Ed, I don't know if you're able to see Ed's, but you can actually see the model on the left-hand side of his image. That's it, still there to this day. And that became the basis for informing the kind of construction or how this piece will come together. So just to quickly, as I said, I went through the plan showing you previously how the building was. I was trying to simplify this. Of course, we're dealing with, fundamentally a brief aspect was ensuring that the building suited work for New Wave London as is now and in the future, that this, if you are going to invest in this building became essentially the permanent home, at least for the next 15, 20, 25 years for the business. So ground floor plan, you can sort of see how the joinery workshop on the ground floor plan has been extended at, I think it works out about 500 square meters of joinery workshop, just over 5,000 square feet. Essentially everything that's made or manufactured for New Wave projects is made in here. Windows, doors, kitchens, joinery, anything you can think of is here. And this became our workshop for our building on top also. Ancillary to that, there was a storage space we converted into an office. This has since been rented by a reprographics company, a local reprographics company. The vertical circulation that existed in the building was retained. That wasn't touched. We did extend that up into the roof extension. And then we had the joinery workshop manager's office / security office just at the wing of the building. Moving up the first floor quickly, I can show you this was when I was speaking about the fit out of New Wave's London's office originally. It was located in this zone, this sort of additional wing. We subdivided that, created 2 new offices with additional offices. This sort of revised layout, that this roof extension sort of unlocked this floor and created 5 additional offices for rent for local SMEs. In addition to this, some of the spraying booths were taken out of ground floor level, moved up to first floor level with a finishing workshop. So that gave manufacturing just on ground floor alone. And then to the roof extension itself. As I said, we extended the vertical circulation up to the second floor, extended the protected corridor into the heart of that floor plan as much as we could. And that allowed us to connect all 4 additional offices to that kind of heart or a corridor heart of the building. The larger office here, this one noted as number 14, if you can see that, or the dark grey, that is New Wave London's office, as you see in the photograph. A series of meeting rooms, large open space. Ed's currently sitting in one at the moment. And then smaller offices off that. Number 15, the lighter one, the fifth out on the terrace, I believe is currently being rented by an engineering company. And the smaller one at the front is jewelry maker, diamond cutter. And this remaining office we use as a temporary exhibition space, and still is to that day. Space where we've met with Matt and Byron and a few others last year for any jury visits. Quick section, you can sort of understand how the joinery workshop sits in the sort of building. That sort of second floor with the offices, the spraying booths, and that extension of the vertical circulation up onto the second floor level into the roof extension. And then, yeah, the front elevation, the kind of key drawing. I don't know if you can see this, but this idea of this, we always talk about this pavilion in the trees. But that kind of moment I was speaking about earlier, how that's what we've ended up with. But here's where we were back 5, 6 years ago in terms of the project. It's funny how you can come back to something and how, maybe consciously or subconsciously you sort of end up back in weirdly a very similar position than you were originally. So the construction, obviously we've got a building that's operational every day. We've got obviously New Wave London are based there, workshop and office. There's offices being rented by local small and medium enterprises, as I said. So the building has to function 24/7. First thing was to create this sort of large scaffold structure over the entire building, and essentially this give a roughly about 600 square meters kind of working deck on which to work on. It became sort of an extension of the workshop, so to speak. And I'm going to just go through a series of photographs. You can sort of see how this structure essentially comes together. Yeah, you can sort of see the glulam. It's actually a nice time we can talk about the glulam. We selected Douglas fir. We worked very closely with Elisabeth. We had the glulam lens delivered to the yard, reversed into the workshop, cut in the workshop, and then craned onto the roof onto this deck. So it was brilliant. Everything was kind of manufactured on site. Douglas fir. I mean, we work with Douglas fir. I previously worked with Douglas fir on a project many years ago. It was selected for a couple of reasons. The weight to density ratio is one of the best. It's easy to handle. It was affordable. I mean, compared to other timbers, it was quite good, and it could be used internally and externally, as some of you probably know. Yeah, and then profile-wise, quite an interesting story. As we were kind of developing the project, we didn't settle on a profile or a size that sort of we had to accept. But we worked very closely with structural engineer, with Elisabeth's team, and working with some off-the-shelf product. Okay, what sizes do you have available? What sizes work from a fire resistant inherently that would work over these spans? And yeah, what's available in the factory or in the warehouse that we can take and work with. And so we designed around a profile that Elisabeth and her team had readily available. And that was quite a nice way of working. It felt very collaborative in that sense. So as you can see, these are you can sort of see some of the cut glulam pieces on site being prepared to be erected. The columns, this is Jacek. This is the column. It's actually column detail. We use this sort of mortise and tenon plug detail for the columns. Each of the columns were plugged into that sort of glulam ring beam. Jacek just doing the finishing touches on that moment. And yeah, I'll sort of move through these quickly. But the idea of having this kind of covered space and deck was kind of brilliant way to work. You felt like you were inside all the time. You could control everything. Sort of steel plate slotted detail, knife plate connection. You can sort of see how that's been kind of recessed into this sort of the timber lintel detail. And then this sort of jig and how the sort of male to female connection was connected to the beams themselves by sort of quite considerable number of bolts. The great thing was, as you can see, it all coming together because we'd we'd sort of created that ring beam around the perimeter. The roof extension sat quite a bit above the sort of accommodation below. So we had this considerable void space underneath that we could utilize. In this case, you can sort of see this trench. We were creating, this was the trench. This became the trench for the perimeter trench heating throughout the build. But also give us an opportunity to run services in that zone as well. And really insulate that level as well. That kind of allowed us to offset moments where maybe we were weak in one area, we could sort of increase it in these positions. Again, a photograph. This is actually the roof of the first New Wave's office was directly below this. This is actually a shot of the external terrace, which I'll come to in a second, but we installed pavers on top of this. Open joint water would flow down through the pavers and use the existing roof to drain that water away. And yeah, you can start to see now it coming together in terms of its construction. Again, you can sort of see the perimeter trench. And then that kind of key detail moment, we had this sort of single column, double column scenario. The double column scenario became that moment for the aperture. So in the large moments, fixed wing, fixed glazing, but in the smaller moments, the sort of fixed aperture for passive ventilation. And yeah, a fundamental part of the project, and where kind of maybe a lot of the success lies in. New Wave were working a number of projects at the time, continue to do so, maybe 5, 6, 7 at any one time. And we all know from construction there's considerable waste on sites. So any opportunity we could to sort of divert any of that waste to New Wave, we did. We tried to reuse it. In this case, you can sort of see we tried to take an insulation that we could potentially reuse in the building. It was old timber, that could be used for raised floors or noggings or whatever it might be, framing or even temporary support, whatever that was the case. But using as much as possible, divert from landfill, get it to site, see what we could do with it. Again, this is the benefits of having a workshop, a ground floor on site. I mean, anything's possible. These were samples we were creating of actually in this case, you can see the large samples. This was the render we were going to render. You can actually see in this shot, the sort of external render was going on the base of the building. Whilst we were creating this roof extension, we also wanted to upgrade the existing building from its sort of thermal envelope, because that kind of solid brick construction or cavity wall was kind of improve on that. These are large scale render samples. You can sort of see we're at this moment in time we were testing pigmentations on the glulam just to see what might align. And that's Jean-Marc very proud of his the sample we selected. But again, benefits of the workshop, you can sort of see it behind there. Anything can be made and tested. Moving into the workshop, as I said, we had glulam lengths that Elisabeth supplied to us. I think there was approximately, I have it noted earlier, it was just over 900 linear meters glulam that was delivered to the site. We used that obviously in the structure, but we used it as every single piece of glulam was used. We used it for the beading for the windows, benches, internal furniture, the grills on the trench heating. Nothing went to waste. This is actually a testing of the external beading for the glazing, for the fixed glazing. We were testing profiles. Obviously, of course, with glulam, you don't want water to sit on the horizontal surface. It's making sure that these are sloped. This piece is, I'm going to say, it was 8 degrees slope, 10 degrees slope, 12 degrees slope. As you can see, we settled on the 8 degree. Okay, tick. Let's move forward. Start making and lift it up onto the roof. And again, endless testing of color, protection. How would this work internally? This just became a constant on the job. There wasn't a week, but we were fundamentally trying something. And then completion. I came back to the photograph of where we were. This is New Wave office as it stands. I'd say today, Ed's currently in it there at the moment. He's in the sort of conference suite that you can see at the back of this image, looking back towards the office. The glulam structure continued. We used the kind of acoustic straw panels in between any of these, in between any of the kind of spans, and then glulam, Douglas fir veneer paneling to create this sort of timber wall that would hide all the archivings, backhouse kitchens, toilets, showers, etc. And again, just you can sort of see we're following that through even into some of the joinery. That's the aperture I was just speaking about earlier, that kind of manual operation, back to kind of basics in a sense. How do you open a window or open an opening just to get air into the room? There's a kind of nice honesty in that sort of approach to things. It's, obviously, a client that buys into that's very important as well. There's the bench, actually one of the benches. This was the last piece of glulam we left. We made a bench internally, and that's currently sits in New Wave's office. A hint of some of the accommodation of that toilets behind. And yeah, more shots of the internal space. Moving out into the communal area, this was the kind of protected stair core. As I said, we extended existing stair core up into this level, up into the timber extension. That connected it to all the new offices with the communal terrace. kind of again, this kind of reuse of material. As I said, New Wave London had just completed a project for Aesop. It was leftover. We'd actually lime render left over from the project. We reused whatever we left in sort of these sort of communal spaces, so nothing went to waste at all. That goes for the same for sockets, switch plates, data, taps, sinks, anything that we could, we utilized. We tried to utilize as much as possible. It's actually one of my favorite shots of the project. I think it gives a kind of an insight into this idea of sitting in the trees. But yeah, it gives an idea of how it's all come together as a kind of a consistent image and material. And then that exhibition space, this is what I spoke about earlier, where we're using this space as the temporary kind of exhibition space last year for any elements we were presenting on the building.
Barry,
And then the terrace itself. Yes, sorry,
I
Matt.
might have to hurry you along a bit.
No problem. No problem. That's fine. I'm nearly there. I'm nearly there. Yeah, and then the terrace, the communal terrace for accessible for everybody, finishing with the sort of that idea, as I said, the timber pavilion sitting amongst the trees. That project was completed. The project was completed in, I'm going to say November 23. Sort of end of 24, we've done a quick analysis, sort of energy use of how the building would work. I'll obviously run out of time here, so I'll just be brief. You can maybe screen grab these if you wish. But, key statement here is energy use per square meter decreased by 25% compared to the pre-furbishment baseline, and a considerable improvement considering the 40% increase in floor area on the building itself. So quite significant turnaround on where we were previously. See about carbon storage of Douglas fir glulam. I'm sure you're all versed in that. So there's quite quite a lot of analysis into that and the benefits as well. And again, as I said earlier about diverting things for landfill, one thing I didn't touch off, we did remove, creating that extension of workshop or the structure, we removed the insulated roof panels that existed on the workshop, put them in the yard, extended up and reuse them again. So I think we had 350, 400 square meters of roof panels that we reused on top of the roof extension. So again, less money. And of course, then when everything's built on site fabrication of timber components, you've sort of transport emissions are dramatically way down. Spoke about this, about obviously the kind of benefits to the local community also with sort of space for local small and medium enterprises. And yeah, of course, off the back of that, and yeah, we had a great year last year. Recognized by RIBA, Architects Journal, and of course the Wood Awards as well in two categories. So and then some publications on the back of that. And that's it. That's for finish.
Great, thank you very much, Barry. Some really informative pictures there. So over to you, Ed. Do you like to start sharing screen?
Yeah, I'll start sharing now. You got me now? Yeah. Everyone, you can see my screen okay?
Yeah, is that yours or is that Barry's still?
That's me, sorry there, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to try that again, Ed. Yeah, okay, yes.
You can see my screen okay now?
All promising, yes, got it. We'll have to be fairly brisk if we want time for photos at the end, questions at the end.
Can you see my screen okay now?
Yeah,
looks great.
Yeah, okay. So as you know, I'm now sitting here on the top of the workshop in the office. New Wave, we are sitting. So this is our workshop downstairs where we manufacture all the joinery for our projects. That's been extended by something like 25% with the project that Barry's just discussed, giving us more room and and more capacity. And I just thought I'd share a couple of other projects that we've built in timber. New Wave, Barry's kind of covered quite comprehensively already. The projects would just give a background of who we are and compare a little bit the our own New Wave House project with other things that we've done and things that we learnt along the way and kind of led into us doing our own kind of structural timber project. Our first foray into so let's say innovative structural timber was House in a Garden by Gianni Botsford, which you might have seen before and was probably discussed maybe 7 or 8 years ago by Timber Development. I think there were some awards and whatnot. But this project was essentially led by this oculus, which was to capture light. And the architects had used lots of grasshopper modeling to figure it out. But in the end, the most interesting thing for us was, in order to make that timber structure, it was all done by hand. And we worked with a supplier in Italy who built it like a boat, and there were over 1,000 clamps, all these layers of timber used, and actually the kind of handcrafted approach became very important for us. In this case, that project was all manufactured in spruce as opposed to Douglas fir. That was just a lighter in that case for that project. But on the inside was where we had worked with a lot of Douglas fir to line out the internal spaces. Then 4 years ago, we started working on a project with Takeo Shimazaki Architects. And here the frame was in European oak as opposed to Douglas fir. But these are very similar section sizes to what we ended up using at New Wave House. But the weight of the oak was quite considerably different. Down there, it actually made for quite a more involved install process. And then in terms of joints, Barry showed you the brackets that we used on New Wave House. Those are manufactured by Piveteaubois, which are quite a popular product when looking for these concealed timber to timber junctions. Here we actually were able to do everything with traditional carpentry techniques. So the timber slotted into one another, and they were just, whenever we needed a mechanical fixing, we could do it with concealed screws. And then on top of the timber actually was a stone soffit, which you might have seen. But this was a kind of very similar section size to what we ended up using at New Wave House. That's it in progress. And down there, we built a huge temporary roof over everything, and that was informative of how we went about New Wave House. Created almost like a huge workshop with timber that's going to be expressed at the end and become so much a character of the final building. Protecting it during the construction was invaluable, even though it presented problems for install. Craning, for example, became impossible, so we were manually handling. And then this is another refurb project that we worked on with 6A Architects in Hampstead. And down there was a good mix of different timbers. Externally, we were working with Ikoya on sliding doors and windows, but also on these fixed vents, which ended up being a bit of an inspiration for the vents that we incorporated at New Wave House. But again, internally, everything was done in Douglas fir, just treated in different opacities. So we were using darker oils on the floor, and then in the soffit, different dilutions of Envirograph, fire protection paint that would give different tones to the timber. This is a mix of existing Douglas fir beams and rafters, then cladding in between with new soffit boards. Again, here kind of shows a mix of the different existing and proposed timbers. So where they're existing, they were stained a darker or more opaque stain, and then in between was more translucent. That's just a flavour of some of the other projects that we've done and we're continuing to work on. We've got another Douglas fir project on at the moment that Elisabeth supplied the timber for, and that's using a kind of grid-like structural system. So that will be something that we'll be hopefully talking about in the future. Just before Christmas, a big load of Piveteaubois timber arrived in our yard, and at the moment we're just working our way through that at the moment. So yeah, I'll hand over to Elisabeth and she can talk maybe a little bit more about the timber itself and our relationship with them and what the opportunities are there.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Elisabeth.
Yes, hello. Thanks, Edwards and Barry. Let me, okay, please come share. Share. Is that good?
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, both. I've been to New Wave House and it looks absolutely fantastic. I'd love to have an office there myself. One day, maybe. So, I know there's not too much time left, so I'm going to try and sort of give you a whistle tour, first of all, of Piveteaubois, and then focus a little bit more on the glulam and the Douglas fir. So, I'm UK and Ireland director for Piveteaubois. And Piveteaubois is one of the top softwood sawmiller and manufacturer of timber products in France. Now, Piveteaubois was set up by my grandfather in 1948. So he was a carpenter with a love for making beautiful timber products. But he set up the business in a part of France that is not forested. So that's a bit of a problem. But basically it worked really well for us because he had to compensate for the cost of bringing the timber, the logs over to the mill. And in order to do that, it had to be very innovative and add value to the timber. So that's what they did over the years. They were the only ones, consistently drying the timber, and then they planed the timber, they treated it, they bonded it, they extruded it, they granulated it. And that's really been I think one of the main sort of drive for the growth of the company. That sort of constant innovation. So right now we are a 400 million euro business, and with 3 sites, 2 in France and 1 in Poland. So you've got pictures there of the first one is the Piveteaubois site in the western part of France, in between Nantes and La Rochelle. The central one is Farges in Corrèze. It's more like central France. Now that is in the middle of Douglas fir and spruce forest. And then the third one is in Poland, near Gdansk, and that is in the middle of pine forests. So all of the timber is locally sourced close to each sawmill, and all of the timber is sourced from PEFC certified forests, both in France and Poland. Now, we process actually over 1 million cubic meter of logs, which is quite a bit. But out of all those logs, we transform them into 480,000 cubic meter of sawn timber and 480,000 tons of pellets. And we are active in 4 or 3 major sectors: construction with glulam, CLT, cladding, landscaping, outdoor living products, with products like fencing, fence panels, pergolas, decking, even swimming pools. And then energy is another big sector for us. We're the number one manufacturer of pellets in France. And then anything that, is not used, we waste nothing. There is absolutely zero waste. We use 100% of the log. And what is not used in any of these is going to be burnt. And we have 2 heat and power plants, and we produce electricity. So our products are manufactured with green electricity in our factories. What we don't use, we sell back to the grid. But our core mission, construction, is one of the key sectors for Piveteaubois, and our mission is to provide timber components for the construction industry. So we don't do the design or the erection. We focus on supplying the timber components for others to transform and build with. So I'm just going to focus a little bit on the glulam, because that's what we supply to New Wave. And I don't have time to go over everything. So we are engineered timber specialists. What you see on the left is our glulam warehouse. There's a permanent stock of 3,000 cube of glulam, and then the conditions in that warehouse are perfect for storing glulam. The moisture content, is just at the right level so that the timber doesn't move. Just to give you an idea, we produce 75,000 cubic meter a year of bonded, glued sort of timber in pine, Douglas fir, and spruce. And on the right, you see a big sort of building here. It's a 10,000 square meter CLT production facility that we set up in 2019. And we produce about 32,000 cube a year of CLT. That's about a third of the consumption of CLT in France. Now, let's focus a little bit on the standard glulam offering, because as we discussed earlier with Barry, and Ed pointed out to it as well, is that it's a lot easier to work with suppliers very early on in the design and to understand what's being produced and use what's being produced, rather than kind of come with some sections that, are very complicated and will increase the cost of your project. So very briefly, we produce structural glulam, not joinery grade glulam. There's a little bit in Poland of that in pine, but we mostly do structural glulam. It comes as a standard in a GL24H grade. That means all lamellars are C24 on that glulam beam. The visual quality is visible. We can do non-visible on demand. And then the beams are straight, maximum 13-meter long with chamfered edges. We can press shorter lengths on demand as well. And if ever there's a couple of beams in a project that are curved or that are much longer or bigger, we can work with a local manufacturer to produce those. But if most of it is something we can't do, then we'll pass it on to someone different. So as I was saying, design with standard glulam sections. We follow the German sort of glulam sections, and basically they come in increments of 20 mil in the width and 40 mil in the height. So you'll see, I've put a couple of extract from the catalog. So, it's like you go 80, 120, 140, 160, 200. So when sometimes we get projects where someone says, well, I want 120 by 260. Well, we can't actually produce that. So, there are rules about thickness of lamellars that go into making a beam. And so these are the sections. This is how it's produced. If you're going to do something in between, first of all, you'll need a very high volume of these to warrant a production run. And then we're going to still invoice you for the bigger beam. So much easier to consult us and just find, the sections that will, that you can use and that come as a standard. It's a lot more cost effective. And in New Wave case, it was really unusual. They came to us right at the beginning, and we spoke to the engineers, and we looked at the sections together, and they just took one that was readily available. So, what we can do on glulam as well, we have various treatment options. we do UC2, use class 2 treatment by dipping by default in France because it's a legal requirement for termites. You don't have such a requirement in the UK. We do pressure treatment of Douglas fir and pine. The pressure treatment is to use class 3.2 for Douglas fir. In either gray here, you'll see a pergola with a gray pressure treated glulam. On the right, you'll see brown pressure treated Douglas fir glulam. And at the top, you'll see use class 4 pressure treated glulam. And we are the only ones on the market to do a certified use class 4 pressure treated pine glulam. This can be used, like in the ground. And it's used a lot in the French overseas territories where the weather conditions are quite, harsh. Extremes of like temperature and humidity. And we've been there for over 30 years, with this pressure treated glulam, and it's resisted, the elements all these years. For the CLT, we have a use class 2 water repellent protection during the construction phase that we use for, for our XAPLI CLT. That could potentially be applied on glulam as well. So what we didn't do actually for New Wave is to machine the glulam beams because they've got their own workshop. I mean, that's actually quite rare in the UK. So, they're very unique in having that workshop. For those who don't have machining capabilities, we can actually machine, the beams and cut them to lengths according to your requirements. So to start with, you can give us a takeoff list and we'll give you an estimate, but in the end, we'll need a 3D model in .3D, .ifc, and then we can, give you the final quote. And then everything is sent to this machine here on the left, and then that will machine the beams according to your exact, requirements. And that on the top right, you'll see something that we machined for the customer. That's sapwood-free Douglas fir, glulam, and various sort of machining options that we can offer. Now, I just want to focus a little bit on the Douglas fir, which we've, talked about and was mentioned by, both Barry and Edwards. Douglas fir is actually the top emerging resource in France. It's virtually the number one producer of Douglas fir in Europe and number 2 in the world after North America. So it's right now we have what we predict there will be 2.5 million cubic meters of sawn Douglas fir timber by 2040. That will represent a third of French sawn timber production. It's 18% right now. So there's going to be a lot of Douglas fir available on the market. And I think the trend is that there's going to be a lot more redwood on the market, whether it's Douglas fir or pine. We all know about the about spruce, becoming a bit more scarce due to the sort of diseases that affected, the spruce. So as the price will slowly go down, or the gap between Douglas fir and spruce will go down, I think Douglas fir is going to be used, more and more. And I put there that it's a very nice alternative to larch. And I'm going to sort of detail, some of the benefits or attributes of Douglas fir that make it just, a great, alternative to larch, especially Siberian larch, which is conflict timber and is quite hard to get hold of, these days. So why Douglas
very
fir?
quickly?
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay. Yes, it's kind of
no,
near the end.
speak on. We'll just overrun by 5 minutes or so.
Okay,
So
thank
carry
you.
on, but just
I like to call it the timber species of the future, the ultimate building material. It's very versatile. It's used structurally, like for CLT glulam. You can use it for cladding, decking, fence panels. Basically, it's 90% heartwood and 10% sap. The heartwood is naturally use class 3.2, so can be used externally without treatment. And then the sap, the 10% sap there can be treated to use class 3.2. And you can treat this in brown or gray, as I showed you in the picture before. In France, nearly half of all timber cladding in France is in Douglas fir. And gray as well. Gray is becoming very popular because it ages quite well. It goes from gray to the gray of the timber when it ages, and it doesn't require any maintenance. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is that Douglas fir has got great physical and mechanical properties. It has got superior elasticity module to pine and spruce, and it is more dense at 550 kilogram per cubic meter compared to spruce. And the good thing about it, or one important thing about it, is that as a result, it's going to stock more biogenic carbon than spruce, about 15% more. We have EPDs for all our glulam CLT cladding. All of our products have EPDs, so you can consult them on the French website. There's a little bit of English, that will allow you to understand, all the values there. And then I've just got pictures now, just showing you Piveteaubois. It's a modular timber frame for solar carports that we've launched about a year ago, and that's showing you the brown pressure treated Douglas fir glulam. Couple of projects we did with sapwood-free Douglas fir, and you can read Clifford Tower with Buckland. That's the Bristol Old Vic with sapwood-free Douglas fir as well. Emmanuel College. Actually, looks like it could have been done by you, Barry, and by Edward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm witnessing New Wave House, Elizabeth. I'm hoping it's the next slide.
You've got all the pictures of
Oh yeah,
a
sorry.
new web story.
Yeah. Very good.
And that's the Oxford North Cycle Pavilion with Xylotech, also with CLT, with Douglas fir CLT and sapwood-free Douglas fir glulam. And I mean, maybe you can put another picture of New Wave House, because, it really is like absolutely stunning. And I would say, to finish that, use Douglas fir and glulam, and you work very early on with your architect, structural engineer, and the supplier, just to choose the right sections. That's just that's the end. I can let you read that. Basically, use more timber.
Yeah, we'll leave that slide up for a bit. Thanks very much. All that Douglas fir looks great. Yeah, we've overrun, but I think we can just have some questions anyway. I'll jump straight into them. A couple of people had commented about the colour of the interior. I think Ed touched on that. But what product was used to create the sort of white finish inside?
Yeah, we worked with it was an Osmo. It was an Osmo pigmented oil coating. Just to say, I can add to that, and maybe this answers one of the questions. Externally, we used it's called CUX. So you spell that SIOOX. That's an external. We done loads of testing externally. We're giving some of the kind of knowledge away here, but it was a brilliant product. What it does is it's a great treatment for Douglas fir, and it means that the sort of weathering's consistent across Douglas fir. Now, obviously, Douglas fir is quite red, inherently quite red. You treat it externally, it goes, it's going to go grey. So I spoke about previously about these numerous samples we've done internally. It was important for us, aesthetically as well, that whatever was achieved externally, the same look was achieved internally to get that continuation of color and finish. So the first principles was getting externally weathered with that CUX product, and then using that as the base, and obviously with the intermess coatings, and then the top coat, the pigmented application on top, to sort of make it consistent.
Great, thanks very much. I had a question that just pointed out that foundations hadn't been mentioned. Were foundations left untouched? Did they require anything?
They were actually, yeah. So as I said, because actually the workshop is holding a lot of prominently the kind of main thing, the main structure of the building. We did undertake trial holes on the existing building as well around the perimeter, and we were able to determine very quickly that actually you probably couldn't extend with a heavyweight structure above, and that kind of led us down maybe the Douglas fir route. That idea of it's quite lightweight and it's inherently in its own structure. So yeah, we were able to work closely with the engineer through those trial holes, through that kind of investigation work I said about the existing building, and determine, okay, quite extensive research that yeah, it would be suitable to support a lightweight timber structure on top.
Great. Somebody had asked about how you sort of isolated the office space during the project from all the noise, you know, dust,
Yeah.
fumes, vibration, and all of that.
I mean, yeah, that's, we were working very closely with fire engineer, building control, complying compartmentation from a fire perspective, obviously acoustically, thermal performance. I didn't go into the details of it here, but there's this, there's quite a significant body of compliant work in the background to, on that basis, yeah.
Great. And somebody had asked about the acoustic straw panels. Was that something that you had used before, or New Wave had used before? Was it something you're familiar with?
Yeah,
Part of
we do. Yeah, we do some commercial work. It's a product we have used previously. As a product, we think it's quite nice. It's kind of background of where it comes from. It's sort of aligned with the intent of the project. I would say, affordability comes into this project too. Obviously there's reuse here. With analysis with New Wave London, we were able to figure out it was cheaper to buy that acoustic panel cut and installed rather than plasterboard, skim, and paint. I'm not saying that was a fundamental part of our decision making, but fundamentally how, sometimes we think the stuff that's we consider quite normal and actually, maybe thinking outside the box sometimes is a better way, even just from a cost perspective.
Great. I think that might be a nice note to end on. So yes, I will say thank you to our panelists. There were some other questions which we'll endeavour to answer and just email to all the audience here. But thanks for joining us today. I'm just going to quickly mention the next webinar in the series. You can see it's Westminster Coroner's Court on 15th of April. That was another of the 2025 Wood Awards winners. Very different project. But yes, please join us for that one. Details of how to register for that are all on the TD UK site. Thank you again to our three panelists, and I'll wish everybody a great afternoon. Goodbye.